What looked like a dream life on social media turned into a financial nightmare for dozens of families in Texas. A couple who promised luxury custom homes and beautiful renovations were not building dreams at all. They were quietly draining bank accounts, lying about credentials, and using client money to fund their own lifestyle. This case reads like a home makeover show gone completely wrong, except this time the ending involves federal prison. Today, we are digging deep into how Christopher and Raquel Judge pulled off a massive construction fraud, how they fooled their victims for years, and how federal investigators finally shut it all down. A Texas couple used social media to promise custom new homes and renovations, but in reality, they were fraudsters who stole millions of dollars from unsuspecting clients. This went on for years until the federal government caught up to them. Prosecutors charged them, tried them, and convicted them on conspiracy charges. We are breaking down the unbelievable behavior laid out clearly in a federal indictment. This case comes from Law and Crime. I am Chris Stewart. Before we get fully into the details of this case, I want to take a quick moment to talk about our partner and sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest personal injury law firm. They have more than 1,000 attorneys and have recovered over $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. In recent months alone, a client in Florida received $12 million after insurance companies initially offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, another client was awarded $26 million, which was nearly 40 times the insurer's original offer. Morgan & Morgan makes it easy to fight for what you deserve. You can even start a claim directly from your phone. If you are injured, you can begin your claim at forthepeople.com. You can also click the link below or scan the QR code on your screen. Now back to the case. The two people at the center of this story are Christopher Judge and Raquel Judge. Instead of celebrating the new year, both are now preparing for prison. They each entered guilty pleas to conspiracy to commit wire fraud in federal court in North Texas. Their story feels like a twisted version of Fixer Upper, where everything that could go wrong does go wrong. But unlike a TV show, there is no happy ending here. The couple admitted to stealing nearly $5 million from customers through unfinished custom home builds and renovation projects. The details of how they carried out this scheme are shocking. Christopher and Raquel were managing members of a company called Judge DFW LLC, which operated in the Fort Worth area. They relied heavily on social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram to sell a polished image of success. Their posts showed high-end custom homes, stylish designs, and confident promises. They marketed themselves as a one-stop solution for dream homes built exactly to their clients' specifications, but the reality was far different. The homes were not finished, the work was poorly done. In many cases, construction barely progressed at all. What began as excitement quickly turned into frustration and fear for the people who trusted them. One of those victims was a woman named Kristen Newman. She spoke with Texas news outlet WFA and described how things seemed normal at first. When she hired the judges, Christopher presented himself as both an architect and a builder. Everything appeared professional in the beginning, but then construction slowed down and problems started piling up. She told WFA that they began questioning why certain work was not completed. Then they noticed overcharging. At one point, she realized she had paid for work that had not been done. When she asked for her money back, Christopher told her he no longer had it. Another victim, Lane Simmons, shared a similar story. She said the judges came to her home and sold themselves as a Chip and Joanna Gaines style team, but the work they delivered was disastrous. Within weeks, tiles began cracking, floors split apart, the kitchen floor started sinking. The exterior trim looked sloppy and unprofessional. Framing had to be completely torn out and rebuilt. The staircase was dangerously constructed and was barely supported by a single board. Code violation after code violation appeared throughout the house. A family friend who was also a contractor inspected the work and was shocked. He reportedly said it was one of the worst jobs he had ever seen and that much of it was unsafe. For homeowners, this was not just about money. It was about safety and trust being completely destroyed. Federal prosecutors later charged Christopher and Raquel Judge with 7 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Each count related to different victims. Every victim lost thousands of dollars, and in some cases much more. According to court documents, one couple made 12 separate payments and lost over $350,000. Civil lawsuits began piling up. One victim hired a professional inspector who discovered that Christopher Judge was not actually a licensed architect. This was a critical lie at the center of the entire scheme. Victims told WFA that it was difficult to find law enforcement willing to take on such a complicated white-collar case. Eventually, the Euless, Texas Police Department stepped in, working alongside the FBI and the United States Secret Service. Federal investigators laid everything out clearly in a criminal complaint and indictment filed in the Northern District of Texas. The indictment stated that Christopher and Raquel advertised Judge DFW using Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok posts and messages. They represented that they owned a custom home building and remodeling business. They claimed to offer architecture, construction, and interior design services. They falsely stated that Christopher Judge was an architect. When potential customers showed interest, Christopher would submit bids that were below market value. He promised completion within 4 to 6 months. This made the offers extremely attractive. Once clients agreed, they signed contracts and paid in multiple installments. Payments were sent through wire transfers or checks, triggering interstate wire communications. Many victims were instructed to wire payments directly into Judge DFW Chase business account. Checks were deposited into that same account. Once the money was deposited, prosecutors say the defendants frequently transferred funds into other jointly held Chase accounts. The money was then used to keep the scheme going and to pay for personal living expenses, including luxury items. According to an FBI special agent, the judges would start projects just enough to appear legitimate. Then progress would slow or completely stop. When subcontractors were hired, they were often unqualified and did poor quality work. Victims who contacted the judges with concerns were met with excuses. Christopher reportedly avoided direct answers and insisted work would continue if payments kept coming in. The scope of the scheme was massive. Investigators said it began around August 2020 during the pandemic and continued until January 2023. Over that time, more than 40 victims across 6 counties in North Texas were defrauded. At least 24 construction projects were affected. The total loss was estimated at approximately $4.8 million. The couple had already faced issues with the state of Texas before federal charges were filed. They were cited for hundreds of code violations and repeatedly warned about falsely claiming Christopher was an architect. In May 2022, the Texas Board of Architecture issued a formal warning stating that both Christopher Judge and Judge DFW violated state law by using the title architect without proper registration. Court documents included charts showing just a portion of the fraud. Payments ranged from about $52,000 to more than $360,000. Many victims continued paying for months and even over a year, hoping their homes would finally be completed. While Christopher was the face of the business, Raquel Judge played a key role. According to the indictment, she scheduled meetings with potential clients, explained contracts, collected deposits, and emailed signed agreements. She also actively promoted the business on social media and posted in local Facebook groups such as Alliance Working Moms and Moms of Southlake. Investigators found that money from one project was often used to fund another. This created a cycle similar to a Ponzi scheme. At the same time, a significant amount of money was spent on personal expenses. From October 2020 to January 2023, prosecutors say the judges spent over $865,000 of client funds on themselves. This included payroll payments to themselves, large cash withdrawals, Amazon purchases, legal fees, mortgage payments, cosmetic surgery, and retail shopping. Both Christopher and Rackwell eventually agreed to plea deals. Each pleaded guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Rackwell faces up to 5 years in federal prison, with sentencing scheduled for April. Christopher faces up to 20 years, with sentencing scheduled for May. Both have been ordered to repay millions of dollars in restitution. Joining the discussion to break down the legal side of this case is criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Randy Zelin. He has decades of experience handling complex fraud cases. When asked what stood out to him, he explained that while the case is tragic for victims, the fraud methods themselves are not unusual from a legal perspective. He described how fraudsters often rely on lies stacked on top of lies to keep schemes alive. He explained that some fraudsters operate quietly, while others are loud and attention-seeking. In this case, the judges were highly visible. Their social media presence helped them attract victims and fueled their confidence. The attention and lifestyle only pushed them to become more reckless. Randy compared this case to classic fraud schemes like Bernie Madoff's, explaining that while the scale may differ, the behavior pattern is similar. Money from new clients was used to cover previous obligations. Lies were told to maintain the illusion of success. Eventually, the entire structure collapsed. He also explained why this became a federal case. The use of interstate wires, including bank transfers and electronic communications, gave federal authorities jurisdiction. This allowed agencies like the FBI to step in when local resources were limited. As the conversation continued, Randy explained the psychological patterns behind fraud. Some people get trapped trying to fix mistakes instead of admitting failure. Others are driven purely by greed. In either case, once the lies begin, they often grow until exposure becomes inevitable. This case highlights the fine line between civil disputes and criminal fraud. Poor workmanship alone does not always lead to criminal charges. But lying about credentials, taking money under false pretenses, and misusing funds crosses that line. In the next part, we will continue breaking down the legal consequences, sentencing guidelines, and the reality victims face when trying to recover stolen money. As the discussion continued, the focus shifted toward how fraud cases like this are evaluated by prosecutors and why so many victims struggle to see justice quickly. Randy Zelin explained that law enforcement agencies have to make difficult decisions about where to spend limited resources. Not every failed construction project can become a criminal case. Many disputes remain in civil court because they involve broken contracts rather than criminal intent. He explained that timing and intent are everything. If someone starts a business with real plans and honest beliefs, but the project fails, that is usually a civil matter. But if someone lies from the beginning, fabricates credentials, or takes money knowing they cannot deliver what they promised, that becomes fraud. In this case, the lie about being a licensed architect was especially damaging and easy to prove. Randy gave an example comparing it to someone pretending to be a lawyer. If a person claims to be an attorney, takes a retainer, and is not licensed, that is criminal fraud. But if a licensed attorney does poor work, that usually stays in civil court. The same principle applies to architecture and construction. Pretending to hold a professional license puts the public at risk and violates trust in a way the law takes very seriously. This distinction played a major role in the federal case against Christopher Judge. The fact that he repeatedly claimed to be an architect, even after receiving warnings from the Texas Board of Architecture, showed a pattern of intentional deception. It was not just bad work. It was a false identity used to gain money. The conversation then turned to how common it is for fraud cases like this to go unprosecuted when they happen on a smaller scale. Randy confirmed that many similar cases never reach criminal court. Often, homeowners are left to pursue civil lawsuits that take years and cost additional money. that reality makes this case stand out because of its size, duration, and number of victims. With more than 40 victims and nearly $5 million in losses, the scale made it impossible to ignore. Federal agencies were able to step in and dedicate the resources needed to trace financial records, analyze bank transfers, and build a detailed timeline of the fraud. As prosecutors reviewed the evidence, they were able to show how money flowed from victim to victim. Payments from one homeowner were used to temporarily fund work on another project. This created the illusion of progress, while the overall financial hole grew deeper. This pattern closely resembled the mechanics of a Ponzi scheme, even though it involved construction rather than investments. Randy explained that running a small business does not automatically make this behavior criminal. Many legitimate businesses use incoming payments to cover past expenses. The crime occurs when clients are lied to about how their money will be used and when false promises are made to obtain additional funds. In this case, victims believed their payments were going toward their own homes. Instead, much of the money was diverted elsewhere or spent on personal items. The use of social media also played a critical role. Platforms like Instagram and TikTok allowed the judges to carefully curate an image of success. Photos, videos, and testimonials created trust. For many victims, seeing active social media accounts made the business feel legitimate and modern. That visibility worked in the judge's favor for years. At the same time, that same digital footprint became evidence. Investigators were able to collect posts, messages, and advertisements that contradicted the reality of the work being done. Screenshots from local Facebook groups were included in court filings, showing how Rockwell actively marketed their services to specific communities. Rockwell's role in the scheme became clearer as the case unfolded. Prosecutors emphasized that she was not simply unaware or uninvolved. She scheduled meetings, explained contracts, collected deposits, and reassured clients when problems arose. Her involvement was central to maintaining trust and keeping money flowing in. When the plea agreements were discussed, Randy explained how federal sentencing works. Unlike state cases, federal sentences are based on a point system. Each crime carries a base level. Additional points are added based on factors like the amount of money involved, the number of victims, and the role of the defendant. Points can be reduced if the defendant accepts responsibility and pleads guilty. For Christopher Judge, the plea agreement included a sentencing cap. The government and defense agreed that his sentence would not exceed 78 months. This type of agreement requires the judge's approval. It is not common, but it provides certainty for both sides. Based on calculations, his sentencing range likely falls between 63 and 78 months. Rockwell's potential sentence is lower, with a maximum of 5 years. The difference reflects how federal guidelines weigh leadership roles and specific conduct. While both were deeply involved, Christopher's false claims about being an architect and his role as the primary decision-maker increased his exposure. The discussion then turned to restitution and what victims can realistically expect. Randy was blunt. Even when courts order restitution, collecting the money is difficult. If the defendants have no assets, payments may be minimal. In prison, inmates earn very little, and only small amounts can be deducted toward restitution. He explained that restitution orders function like judgments. If the defendants ever come into money, such as through inheritance or winnings, victims could receive payments. But in most cases, full recovery is unlikely. That reality is painful for victims who lost life savings or took out loans based on false promises. Randy shared an important insight about sentencing. Judges often look for signs of genuine remorse. Even small efforts to repay victims can matter. A defendant who attempts to set aside even a few $100s demonstrates acknowledgement of harm. Judges notice effort, not just amounts. He recalled cases where judges became visibly frustrated when defendants made no effort at all. The principle matters. Showing responsibility can influence sentencing outcomes, even if the financial impact is limited. As the conversation wrapped up, it became clear that this case serves as a warning. Social media success does not guarantee legitimacy. Professional credentials should always be verified, and when something feels wrong, early action can prevent further damage. For the victims, the damage is already done. Homes were left unfinished. Repairs will cost additional money. Trust was broken. While prison sentences may bring some sense of justice, the emotional and financial recovery will take much longer. In the final part, we will close out the case, reflect on the broader lessons, and summarize how this fraud unraveled and why it matters far beyond North Texas. As the case comes to a close, the reality for the victims remains heavy and unresolved. While Christopher and Raquel Judge now face prison time, the families they deceived are left with unfinished homes, unsafe construction, and massive financial losses. For many, this was not just an investment. It was their future, their savings, and in some cases their life plans. Federal prosecutors made it clear that this case was never just about bad business or failed construction. It was about deception at every level. The lies started from the very first interaction. The false claim of being a licensed architect was not a small exaggeration. It was a core selling point that convinced people to trust Christopher Judge with projects that required professional oversight and compliance with safety codes. The continued misrepresentation, even after receiving formal warnings from the Texas Board of Architecture, showed intent. This was not ignorance. This was a deliberate choice to continue misleading the public. That choice carried serious consequences. The federal government's involvement also highlights how complex financial crimes often require extensive resources to uncover. Bank records, wire transfers, digital messages, and social media posts all had to be analyzed. This took time. It took coordination between local police, the FBI, and the United States Secret Service. Without that collaboration, many victims may never have seen accountability. For homeowners watching this case, it sends a strong message. Always verify credentials. Do not rely solely on online images, videos, or testimonials. Social media can be carefully curated to hide reality. A professional appearance does not equal professional qualifications. This case also exposes how easily trust can be exploited. Many victims described feeling reassured by constant communication early on. Friendly messages, quick responses, and confident promises created a sense of security. When problems began, excuses replaced progress. Delays were blamed on supply issues, labor shortages, or paperwork. Each explanation bought more time and more money. By the time victims realized the truth, much of their money was already gone. Legal action was expensive and emotionally draining. Some families felt embarrassed. Others felt overwhelmed. Fraud often thrives in silence, and that silence allowed this scheme to grow. The sentencing phase will be closely watched. While plea agreements limit maximum penalties, judges still have discretion within those ranges. Statements from victims can play a powerful role. Judges often listen carefully to the real-world impact of crimes. Emotional testimony can shape how a sentence is ultimately delivered. Raquel Judge's sentencing is scheduled first. She faces up to 5 years in federal prison. Christopher Judge faces a much longer potential sentence, up to 20 years, though his plea agreement places a cap on the time he may serve. Both outcomes reflect how federal law treats large-scale fraud. Even after sentencing, the story does not end. Restitution orders will follow the defendants for years. Any income earned in prison will be partially directed toward victims. If either defendant earns money after release, payments can continue. While full repayment is unlikely, the legal obligation remains. For the victims, rebuilding will take time. Some will have to start construction over with new contractors. Others may sell unfinished properties at a loss. The emotional toll of betrayal can be just as damaging as the financial loss. This case also serves as a reminder of why licensing laws exist. Architects, contractors, and other professionals are regulated for public safety. When someone bypasses those rules, the consequences can be dangerous. Poor construction is not just inconvenient, it can be life-threatening. The Judge case stands as a cautionary tale in the digital age. Online popularity does not equal legitimacy. Viral success does not guarantee honesty. The same platforms that helped build the illusion also helped dismantle it. As more people turn to social media to find services, this case underscores the importance of due diligence. Check licenses, ask questions, get independent inspections, trust your instincts when something feels off. For law enforcement, this case shows the importance of persistence. White-collar crime is often slow-moving and complex. But when agencies commit to uncovering the truth, accountability is possible. For Christopher and Raquel Judge, the consequences are now unavoidable. The image they carefully constructed has collapsed. The reality is written in court records, bank statements, and victim testimony. For the families affected, justice may feel incomplete, but the exposure of the truth brings some measure of closure. Their voices were heard. Their losses were acknowledged, and their experience may prevent others from suffering the same fate. This was not just a story about bad renovations. It was a story about trust, deception, and accountability. And it serves as a powerful reminder that when promises sound too perfect, it is worth looking closer. That concludes this case. Thank you for following along. We will continue bringing you the stories that matter, breaking down complex cases and shedding light on the truth behind the headlines.